garments in wine.
So it's showing you that Christ drank so much wine, he washed his garments in wine. Christ drank so much wine. When you read the different scriptures in Matthew 11:19, also too it tells you many scriptures. In Daniel the 10th chapter, his eyes were a flame of fire. In Revelation, Daniel, his eyes were lance fire. Read on.
And his clothes in the blood of grapes.
Meaning he drank so much wine, it was as if his clothes were stained in wine. And also showing the characteristics of the so-called black man. He drinks a lot of wine. Read on.
His eyes shall be red with wine.
Speaking still about the Messiah, his eyes shall be red with wine, which was fulfilled in when? Matthew's 11th chapter in the 19th verse. Also about the black man too. He drinks a lot of wine. Read on.
And his teeth white with milk.
And his teeth white with milk, showing you the characteristics of the black man. His teeth shall be white. Back in slavery, you had a picture called a black Sambo, where you show a black man's grinning and showing his white teeth, his white pearly teeth. All right. Continue on. Deuteronomy 33rd chapter.
Deuteronomy 33 and verse 7. And this is the blessing of Judah.
And this is the blessing of Judah. What is the blessing? That the Most High was going to set up Judah to bring forth the truth and the knowledge of the Bible, showing that we are the Israelites. Read on.
And he said, Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah.
So he's saying, Hear, Lord, hear the voice of Judah. Hear his prayers when he cries out to you in the affliction, in the time of affliction. Read on.
And bring him unto his people.
Bring him unto his people, the entire nation of Israel, the West Indians, the Haitians, the Puerto Ricans, the people that are listed on the sign that you see on the camera.
Let his hands be sufficient for him.
So let his hands be sufficient as far as dealing with this truth, as getting the information that's needed, bringing forth the truth to our people. Read on.
And be thou in help to him from his enemies.
And be thou in help to him from his enemies. Who is the enemies? The so-called white man and all nations that's here in America. So the Most High is protecting us when we go forth to do his work and teach on the streets.
Right, so now let's go to the book of Joel. Okay? We're going to go to the book of Joel, chapter 3. And we're going to read verse 1, 3, and 6. Briefly, okay? Joel chapter 3 and 1. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem.
This is a future prophecy. That's the time we're living in. Continue. Because Judah and Jerusalem represents the whole nation. We're still in captivity. Read on.
Verse 3. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot.
When was this done? In slavery, in the 1600s. Read on.
And sold a girl for wine.
That was the purpose of slave trade. The Africans and the Arabs sold us in slavery, and they sold us. And they sold a girl for wine. Read on.
That they might drink.
And they did drink the wine. Read on.
Verse 4. Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon?
So the Most High is speaking to who? The Africans. Why? Because these people were the original inhabitants of the land of Tyre and Zidon. Continue on. Read on.
And all the coast of Palestine.
And who's running the coast of Palestine now? The Arabs. That's fighting over the land of Israel. So it's showing you that the Africans and the Arabs were involved in the slave trade in selling us to the so-called white man. Read on.
Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head.
So the Most High said, no matter what they do, if they pray to him 100,000 times a day, and they say, well, we're sorry what we did, the Most High says he's not going to forgive them. He's going to return a recompense upon their own heads. No matter how much Allah Akbar they sing or shout, the Most High is not going to forgive what they have done to his people.
Right. Let me say this. When recompense meaning payback.
Right.
All the nations were envious over Judah and the other tribes being the chosen of the Most High. So Tyre and Zidon, the Africans, and Palestine, meaning the Arabs, figured, look, we could pay the Most High back for not choosing us. Let's destroy them. Let's put them in slavery. So the Most High said, if you do that, thinking you're paying me back for not choosing you as my chosen people, swiftly and speedily will I return your own payback upon your own head. Okay? So now we're in I'm going to jump down to verse 6. Okay? The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians.
Now, this is showing you. It's showing you right here. Who sold us is the children of Judah, the so-called black Americans, and the children of Jerusalem, the rest of the tribes of Israel. When also it said Jerusalem, it also includes Benjamin and Levi, the so-called West Indians and Haitians. It said the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians. Why is it saying the Grecians? Because the Greeks was the first ruling empire of the so-called white man. And all white people stem from the Greeks. So it's talking about the so-called white people, Europeans, up until this day, America. Read on.
That ye might remove them far from their border.
And we were removed far from our border, which is Jerusalem. We were sold from the west coast of Africa, but we migrated down into Africa in the time of 70 AD. I'm going to show you in different historical books called Babylon to Timbuktu. So from the west coast of Africa, we were sold by the Africans and the Arabs to the so-called white man.
Right. So from there, let's jump back to Deuteronomy 28 and let's get verse 68 to show you how they removed us far from our border on slave ships. Does the Bible speak about that? Yes, and we're going to prove it. Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again.
Now, read on.
With ships.
This was a second time. The first time that we were in Egypt was with Jacob and his 70 souls, and we became a great nation. And we came out of Egypt under Moses. But this second time was after we became a great nation, and we were sold from the west coast of Africa to the Americas. Now, and Egypt is a Greek word that means bondage, slavery. America also represents Egypt, which is our bondage and our captivity. Now it says, the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again, meaning a second time. Read it again.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
Again with ships. It's slavery into America a second time. Read on.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee. Read on.
Thou shalt see it no more again.
So by the way Moses spoke, it was in Mount Sinai. And read on.
And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies.
And the there is America. America, the islands of the Caribbeans. Read on.
For bondmen and bondwomen.
And it says, you shall be sold unto your enemies, the so-called white man, the Greeks that we read in Joel, the 3rd chapter. Read on.
And no man shall buy you.
The bondman and bondwoman is slave man and slave woman. When it says, no man shall buy you, no man of our people in this captivity was going to redeem us or deliver us out of the hand of the so-called white man. You have many black leaders that tried, but they failed. Because who's going to deliver us out of this captivity? Jesus the Messiah. And when he comes back, it's not going to be with peace and love. It's going to be with war and great destruction.
Right. So let's go to Jeremiah 14:2.
Right.
Okay, to prove the color of Judah.
Right.
Jeremiah 14 verse 2 says, Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish.
So the Bible said Judah is mourning. Mourning for what? For better rights, civil rights, equality, for jobs, for more employment, for against the oppression, against the hatred. For you name it, every aspect Judah is mourning. Read on.
And the gates thereof languish.
So when it says the gates thereof languish, means the black leadership of our people is languishing. They're languishing in the sense that they're not teaching our people the truth as to who they really are, the Israelites. What they're teaching our people, they're African Americans, Islam, and all these different false philosophies. But they're not teaching that they're the Israelites, and the so-called white man is a devil, and he's not the Jew, according to the Bible.
Right on. And that ties in what Genesis 49 said about them couching as an old lion. Who shall rouse them up? Okay. So that's what also goes into that language. Our leaders are languishing because they don't know what to teach the people. Okay. It says they are black unto the ground.
So it's showing you that Judah is black unto the ground. Meaning what? They're dark-skinned people. The Jews are dark-skinned people, black people. When you dig up the earth, it's different shades of brown, dark color. And we're going to prove it more in the historical books, showing you that the Jews were all black people. All right?
Right. And that ground, meaning when he said different shades of brown, because you do have some light-skinned blacks, ranging from a light brown to a very dark brown. Okay? Because when the top layer of the soil is brownish, then the deeper you go, the darker it gets. Okay?
So we had to go to the book, this historical book called Babylon to Timbuktu. Now, this was written by a black scholar. Some of you have said, but why are you using the white man books? We use all books, blacks, white, because it bears reference to the Bible. So we had to go to page 84 and read what this black scholar wrote.
Right.
And his name is Rudolph Windsor.
It says, in the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey,
more white people, the Romans are Italians, white people, that captured Jerusalem. Read on.
Captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state.
Remember that. They put an end to our rulership, our nation, in the land of Israel, not Africa. Read on.
With great slaughter.
With great slaughter. They were slaughtering, killing us, butchering us. Mass genocide. Read on.
During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa.
You hear that? 1 million Jews fled into Africa. So now, if these Jews are white people, what would be the purpose or the sense of fleeing down to Africa? So surely these were black people. 1 million Jews fled down into Africa, like we just read in the book of Deuteronomy 28:68. And you were sold from where? From Africa to America by who? The Africans and the Arabs. Read on.
Right, let me bring this out. And this also proves what you had said earlier about the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh come. Because right after Christ came, the Romans under Vespasian, like we're reading, destroyed Israel. And they lost their power. Okay? I'm going to read on. Fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery, the slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves.
Okay. So, sure, that's the proof right there. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. Now I can show one more book called Sex and Race. This is by J.R. Rogers, another black historian and scholar. All right, in this book on page 91, he asks a question right here. This is the question that he posed to the readers. It says right in page 91, were the Jews originally Negroes? The answer is yes, and still are. Now this is what he said about the European painters. It says, European painters and sculptors, by their use of white models to typify biblical characters, have falsified tremendously the physiognomy of the ancient Jews. That's true. When was this done? In the Renaissance period. This was done by the Renaissance to typify biblical characters by using white men to portray the biblical characters, Moses, Joshua, Jesus Christ, the apostles, and all the people in the Bible. That's why today you have a prominent picture of this guy that we call Jesus Christ, a white-looking guy, which actually his name is Caesar Borgias, the second son of Pope Alexander VI of Rome. Now I have another historical book called Nature Knows No Color Line, again by J.R. Rogers, another black historian. And in this book, on certain pages, it's going to tell you, he said the Jews of Spain and Portugal were so dark. And he's going to give the history concerning this matter. Now, this is on page 123 in section Nature Knows No Color Line. And this is what it states in the book. It says right here. It says, Waite says, an interesting gradation of all shades down to the black is exhibited by the Jews. Especially dark were the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The Portuguese Jews were very dark, says Pritchard. The Duchess of de Abrantes, wife of Napoleon's ambassador to Portugal, said that the Jew, the Negro, and the Portuguese would be seen in a single person. So dark were the Jews, especially of Portugal and southern Spain, that many whites thought all Jews were black or dark. Showing you right there. Now he's going to say, it says, many of the Jews who were banished from Portugal by John II settled in the West Indies. John Bigelow, who visited Jamaica in 1850, saw the descendants of these Jews and said they were Negroid. So this is the fact right here. These are the facts showing you. So the Bible and history proves the facts that what we're showing, these are the tribes of Israel. In conclusion to the tribe of Judah, I'd like to get one more scripture. This is Luke 21 and 20.
And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies.
So this was Christ speaking to the Pharisees and Sadducees and to the nation of Israel, showing that the Roman armies was going to compass Jerusalem. Read on.
Then know that the desolation thereof is nigh.
Know that the desolation, the destruction of us as a nation of people and of our rulership, read on, was going to come to an end under the Romans. Read on.
Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains.
So those who are in Judea, which is Jerusalem, flee to the mountains. The mountains also represents Masada and down into the interiors of West Africa. Read on.
And let them which are in the midst of it depart out.
He said, depart out of Jerusalem. Why? Because the Romans was going to destroy Jerusalem. Like we read in the book called Babylon to Timbuktu. What happened to Jerusalem? Read on.
And let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto.
He said, and those that are into the countries return not back into it, because there's going to be great slaughter and great atrocities. Read on.
Verse 22. For these be the days of vengeance.
For these were the days of vengeance upon us for disobeying and breaking the Most High's laws as a nation of people. Read on.
That all things which are written may be fulfilled.
That all things that are written where? In the prophecies of the Old Testament by Moses and all the prophets had to be fulfilled. And this was a fulfillment of what Christ was speaking about. And us coming to Americas as slaves. Read on.
But woe unto them that are with child.
So that's it on that. So we're going to begin now with Issachar and Zebulon. Zebulon represents the Indians throughout from Guatemala to Panama, and Issachar represents the Mexican Indians known as the Aztecs. So we'd like to begin with Genesis 49 or 13.
It says, Zebulon shall dwell at the haven of the sea.
Now, Jacob was speaking to his son Zebulon. He said, Zebulon, like I said, are the Indians throughout Guatemala to Panama. Zebulon, which were known as the Mayans when the Spaniards came to the New World. Zebulon shall dwell at the haven of the sea. The haven of the sea that he's talking about is the area known as the Panama Canal Zone.
And he shall be for an haven of ships.
He shall be for a haven of ships, meaning the major docking point where all ships come in and out for exporting and importing. And when you look at the Panama Canal Zone, it cuts the trip around the world from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. That's why the Panama Canal Zone was built, based on the prophecy that Zebulon would be a haven of ships. Read on.
And his border shall be unto Zidon.
So back in ancient time, even Zebulon used to dwell at the sea coast, and his border extended up until Zidon. Going on.
Verse 14. Issachar is a strong ass.
Now we're speaking about Issachar, which represents the Aztec Indians, known to as the Mexicans. Not the Spanish, but those of Indian descent. They call themselves Azteca. Read on.
Issachar is a strong ass.
So it said Issachar is a strong ass, meaning he's a strong, hard worker. Read on.
Couching down between two burdens.
And the two burdens that he couching down is what? Is Mexico, which is North America, and Central America. And the two burdens also the burden that he carries upon his back during all his hard labors.
Right. Let me say, they always show the Mexicans, one of their symbols is an ass. That's one of their famous symbols. Let me get this picture.
Right, the burro.
Right, the burro, like you said. Real quick, okay. This is from this book entitled Mexico, Feast and Famine. Okay. And inside, they show you the Mexicans riding on the border. Let me open to it right here.
On what page?
There's no page number on it.
Alright.
Okay. So, let me continue. Verse 15. And he saw that rest was good.
And meaning the rest was a pleasant land. And the rest that they also have is what they call a siesta, where they stop working at 12 o'clock noonday and they rest. And they don't do no work.
Right. A few of the Latin American countries also do that. However, it's the Mexicans who have become famous for it. Anytime you hear of a siesta, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? The Mexicans. Okay? I'll read it again. And he saw that rest was good.
It was also a good land, a beautiful land. Read on.
And the land that it was pleasant.
The land is a beautiful land. So that's where all the American tourists go when they want to go for a vacation. They run down to Mexico, Tijuana, Puerto Vallarta, and all the different places in Mexico. Read on.
And bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant unto tribute.
So he bowed his shoulder. When the Spaniards came over and conquered them, the conquistadores, they bowed their shoulder and became servants. And it says they bowed their minds, and even up until this present day. That's why America is taking NAFTA down to Mexico to pay the Mexican workers a minimum wage, because they are hard workers. His name, Issachar, means he is hired. And the white man knows this prophecy. That's why he exploit and use the Mexicans as cheap labor.
Right. Even here in the city, whenever the Japanese or the white man in general wants a cheap labor, who do they get? The Mexicans, and pay them less than minimum wage. Because they say none of the blacks surely ain't going to work for that, or none of the other Spanish-speaking tribes, but get the Mexicans. You could pay them $1.50 an hour. They'll do it.
Right.
Okay. So now, let's go to Deuteronomy 33.
18 and 19.
Right.
So we're doing Zebulon and Issachar because these two tribes are interrelated. They connect borders. Mexico runs all the way down, extends down to Guatemala and all the different El Salvador and so forth. All these were the families of the Aztecs and the Mayans, and they had close relationship.
Right. So Deuteronomy 33 verse 18. And of Zebulon he said, Rejoice, Zebulon, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tent.
So Zebulon rejoiced in their going out when they used to keep the feast. Now, not talking about the wicked feast that they kept when they went off into wickedness. When they came here first, they were keeping the righteous sacrifices. But then they went off into wickedness, which is sacrificing the people on the altars and cutting the hearts out. That went off into mass wickedness. So it says, Rejoice, Zebulon, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. Who was in the tents of Zebulon? The Aztecs. That's why they used to travel back and forth and used to exchange gifts. Right. They were close relatives.
Verse 19. They shall call the people unto the mountain. Right. The ones that did the calling was Issachar. During the Middle Ages, they were called the Aztecs. Because the verse above it says, Rejoice, Zebulon, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. So it was Issachar that remained in their tents. The Aztecs, they would blow the horn at the feastly occasions and call the tribe of Zebulon up, which were the Mayans, and there they would do sacrifices. Okay, sacrifices of righteousness. So I'll read on. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas, and of treasures hid in the sand.
And when you look it up, the word Panama means the riches of the seas. The riches of the sea. So Panama is rich in the abundance of fish and all the riches that's in the sea. So he's telling you right here about Zebulon and Issachar too.
Right. In ancient times, they actually, before we came to this side of the world, the Aztecs and the Mayans, back in Jerusalem, they really had sacrifices of righteousness. Now, a lot of you know the history that when they came over here, the Spanish discovered them sacrificing human flesh. Okay, is that recorded in the Bible? Yes. Let's go to briefly Hosea chapter, I think it's 8 and 13. Hosea chapter 8 and 13.
Right. Hosea 8 and 13. Yes. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my offerings.
Right. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings. You heard about Montezuma the first, Montezuma the second. A lot of the great kings of the Aztecs and the Mayans, they were sacrificing flesh for the sacrifices of the Most High's offerings. They became wicked. The Bible bears witness to that. Read it again.
They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my offerings, and eat it.
And eat it. So what kind of flesh was they sacrificing? Human flesh. Check out the history. They were sacrificing one another and eating, ripping the hearts out of the chest and then eating it.
Giving it to the gods.
Right, and offering it to these strange gods that they were making up. Okay, Baal. Okay, read on.
But the Lord accepteth them not.
Right, because this was the time of prophecy that all things written should be fulfilled, that all vengeance would come down upon Israel. Read.
Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins.
Right, so the Lord said now he will remember their sins. He's going to visit them. In what form did the Lord visit them? In the form of the Spaniard conquistadors. When they came in 1492 and destroyed them from 1492 on. Read.
They shall return to Egypt.
They shall return to Egypt, meaning they shall return to captivity. Okay, so now, let's go back to, did we finish Deuteronomy 33?
33, and we're down to the, yes, we finished that. So I'd like to list that the Indians today that's living down in, from Guatemala to Panama, they're known as the Cunas, the Chucos, and the San Blas Indians. Those are all descendants of the Mayan Indians today that's occupying from Guatemala to Panama.
Right, let me go to this book briefly, entitled The Hope of Israel, written by Manasseh ben Israel. Okay, these were records that this so-called white man had scribed concerning the Indians that he came across. And by the word Indian comes from the Latin word India, which means servant. That's what it means. So I'm going to go to page 112. I shall speak somewhat in this discourse of the divers opinions which have been, and shall declare in what countries it is thought the 10 tribes are. I'm going to jump down. You must know, therefore, that Alexo Venagas says that the first colonies of the West Indies were of the Carthaginians, meaning Israelites. That's what it's making reference to. Who, first of all, inhabited Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic, and as they increased, spread to the island of Cuba. From thence to the continent of America, and after that towards Panama, New Spain, and Peru. Okay, so this guy is letting you know that the Israelites were spread in the Dominican Republic, Cuba, America, Panama, New Spain, meaning Mexico, and Peru.
And this will end the conclusion in Zebulun and Issachar, but this verse is mainly about Issachar. 1 Chronicles 12 and 32.
And of the children of Issachar.
And the children of Issachar, which are the Mexicans, known back then as the Aztecs, read on.
Which were men that had understanding of the times.
Which were men that had understanding of the times. The times were what? To understand astronomy and astrology. Knowing the zodiac, reading the heavens. Read on.
To know what Israel ought to do.
And they knew what Israel had to do at certain occasions.
The heads of them were 200, and all their brethren were at their command.
So all their brethren were at their command when they would foresee and read the heavens. So when you go back in the history, even the Aztecs had calendars, and they even foretold of futuristic prophecies that occur when you read the Codex and the history of the Aztecs on the writings on the pyramids. So this will end the conclusion of Zebulun and Issachar. Now we're going to Dan.
Right.
To the tribe of Dan.
Genesis 49 and 17. And by the way, the word Dan means judge. Okay? Verse 17 says, Dan shall be a serpent by the way.
So back in ancient time, when Dan was a judge, Dan was like a serpent to the enemies of the nation of Israel. Like a serpent in the way waiting to attack his enemies. Read on.
An adder in the path.
So an adder is a poisonous snake. So when Dan attacked our enemies, it was a vicious and a hard attack. Read on.
That biteth the horse heels.
So like a horse bite, like a serpent will bite a horse's heel, and it will cause the horse to rear up backwards and fall backwards. So Dan was like an attacker, ambusher against our enemies. Read on.
So that his rider shall fall backwards.
So Dan destroyed our enemies, and also too, this is saying Dan caused the nation of Israel to go back into idolatry. When you read the history of Dan.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Deuteronomy 33 and verse 22 to continue on Dan. And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp.
So Dan had a characteristic of a lion's whelp too, a courageous, warlike people.
Right, like with Samson, he was one of the main ones
of the judge of Israel.
Right. It reads on, he shall leap from Bashan.
Now when it says Dan shall leap from Bashan, Dan was situated in the northern part of Israel. So when it says Dan shall leap from Bashan, meaning Dan was going to leap from where he was occupying and blend into the rest of the tribes of Israel. Because what happened to Dan, when you read in the book of Revelation, it's not mentioning Dan. Why? Because Dan was blended in with the rest of the tribes of Israel.
Right, and to prove that, we're going to go to the New Testament in Revelation chapter 7. Okay, the tribe of Dan, they weren't destroyed as people, but they no longer had an inheritance. Like in the past, when the Levites no longer had an inheritance, so in this day and age, the tribe of Dan no longer has an inheritance. The proof of that is Revelation chapter 7. I'm going to read verses 1 down to 8. I'm going to read it swiftly. If you want to interject, do so. It says, And after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth.
So that's the destruction that's going to come from the 4 corners of the earth, the nuclear destruction that's coming against all nations. Read on.
Nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east. Israelites. Because a lot of you try to be smart and go, see, that includes everybody.
That means everybody. It's that of the nation.
Right.
And
so is that it?
Isaiah 11:11.
Right.
And it says, And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time the second time in when he comes back.
Right.
To recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel.
Who?
The outcasts of Israel.
The outcasts of Israel. Read.
And gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth.
Do you hear that? So that explains Revelation 7 and that verse we had read about them coming out of all nations. Okay, so stop the strange doctrine of including the Chinese, the Japanese, the Hawaiians. No, this ain't for you. This is only for the 12 tribes of Israel coming out of all nations under the earth.
All right, so with that, we're moving on to the next tribe, which is Gad, which means truth, which is the so-called North Americans, known as the Cheyenne, the Sioux, the Apache, the Cheyenne, the Apaches, and so forth. This is what you call the so-called North American Indians, Native American Indians. Now, I want to stress this point because you have scholars and so-called biblical scholars saying, well, Native American Indians are Chinese, they came from the Bering Strait. This is a bold-faced, blatant lie. You're looking at a so-called North American Indian right here.
That's
the
right.
Kanyalaga.
And since you made that statement, let's go into this book entitled History of the American Indians by James Adair. Okay? He wrote this book in let me look at it real quick. 1775, and it was first published in the United States in 1930. Let's read about that he find anything about the Native American Indians being descended from the Chinese. I'm going to go to page 13. Page 13 and 14. Bear with me. Here comes right here. All right. It says, some have supposed the Americans, meaning the Indians throughout the North America, to be descended from the Chinese. But neither their religion, laws, customs, and etc. agree in the least with those of the Chinese, which sufficiently proves they are not of that line. I'm going to go to page 14 now. Neither could persons sail to America from the north, referring to the Bering Straits, that lie that you push in schools, that the so-called Indians came through the Bering Straits. I'm reading it again. Neither could persons sail to America from the north, by the way of the Tartary, or ancient Scythia, that from its situation never was or can be a maritime power, and it is utterly impractical for any to come to America by sea from that quarter. Besides, the remaining traces of their religious ceremonies and civil and martial customs are quite opposite to the like vestiges of the old Scythians, meaning the old Chinese, okay? Nor, even in the moderate northern climates, is it to be seen the least vestige of any ancient, stately buildings or of any thick settlements, as are said to remain in the less healthy regions of Peru and Mexico. Several of the Indian nations assure us they crossed the Mississippi before they made their present northern settlements. That's why they call them the Indians Arawaks, meaning when they traveled from the southern coast of South America or made their way up, which connected with the former arguments will sufficiently explode that weak opinion of the American Aborigines being lineally descended from the Tartars or ancient Scythians, meaning Orientals. Jump down. From the most exact observations I could make in the long time I traded among the Indian Americans, I was forced to believe them lineally descended from the Israelites, either while they were a maritime power or soon after the general captivity. The latter, however, is the most probable. This descent I shall endeavor to prove from their religious rites, civil and martial customs, their marriages, funeral ceremonies, manners, language, traditions, and a variety of particulars which will at the same time make the reader thoroughly acquainted with the nations, of which it may be said to this day, very little have been known.
Right, okay. So I like to show in this book too called Native Americans, on page 55, you have a group of Apache scouts. Then on page 67, you have a warrior. On page 67, when you see on the screen, then on page 78, you have another warrior. Then on page 98, you have another Indian warrior, showing you these are not Chinese. So let's go on to the scriptures, and the first scripture we're going to begin with is Genesis 49 and the 19th verse.
Okay. Gad, a troop shall overcome him.
Now stop. It said, Gad, a troop shall overcome him. The troop that overcame the so-called North American Indians was the U.S. Cavalry. Beginning with many different generals, but Custer was the main famous one, and he had other generals after Custer. And from that point, they were destroyed and defeated by the U.S. Cavalry.
Right.
So that's the prophecy showing you of Gad shall be overcome by a troop.
Right. But he shall overcome at the last.
But in the end of this captivity or punishment, Gad is going to overcome. They're going to rise up and get revenge on our enemies. Now the next scripture is Deuteronomy, the 33rd chapter and the 20th verse.
And of Gad he said, Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad.
So the Most High blessed Gad with a large proportion of the lands in North America, such as here in the United States, Canada. They had the largest areas of land mass. Read it on.
He dwelleth as a lion.
So he said, Gad dwells a lion. Now you know how a lion dwells? A lion roams the entire prairie, and he covers a large area of land for their territory. And also too, when he say he dwells as a lion, Gad used to paint their face with war paints, and it shows a warlike character. Read on.
Okay. And teareth the arm.
Now when he said he tear up the arm, they would take a knife and they would cut the skin and make the blood ritual or covenant, saying that we're brothers forever. This came from the so-called North American Indians. Read it on.
With the crown of the head.
And the crown of his head was what? Was the Indian bonnet that he wore upon his head. And we're going to show some pictures on that. You can show that picture.
Let me show you one from this book entitled The Way of the Warrior. Okay, and inside this book, they show you the crown of the tribe of Gad. Okay, and it specifies here with the crown of the head, because the tribe of Gad is letting you know in the last days would have a strange crown. A crown that's unusual to the kings of the earth. Now let's take a look at that crown. Okay. The title says Crowning Glories. And I'm glad it got the word crown there, because it goes directly with the Bible. Crowning Glories. Do you see that crown? That's a magnificent and beautiful crown. Okay, a war bonnet. All right.
In this book called Native American on page 81, it's going to see a group of Indian chiefs. There it is right here. Here's the crown of the head right here. They're still getting around that scripture. That's the proof right here. The crown of the head. There's another one I'm going to show you on page 85. And only top warriors wore these crowns for their victory in battle. Not this one, but this one over here on page 85. See that beautiful crown? That's from the scripture. And that's what the Native Americans, Indians wore upon their head. A crown, a beautiful crown of feathers.
Right, you brought out that part about tear up the arm.
Right, tear up the arm.
That blood brother covenant. Okay, they would get a sharp stone or a knife and break their flesh and put their hands together so that the blood would mingle. I wouldn't suggest you do that today, though. You get AIDS and drop dead. So, but that was the prophecy on what the tribe of Gad would be doing in the last days. Okay? So what was the next scripture we were going to go to?
There's more to that too. There's
more
in the 20th verse.
Right.
Yeah,
Deuteronomy
verse.
33 and 20. It
21.
says 21, excuse me.
Yeah.
And he provided the first part for himself.
So I mean, when he divided different areas of the land, he took for himself. Read on. Because there were other tribes that came along with him. But Gad took their portion of their land. Read on.
Because there, in a portion of the lawgiver, was he seated.
So Gad also too, when he came over, became a lawgiver. Because they took part in what? In the ceremonies, issuing the laws, and showing justice among themselves. Read on.
And he came with the heads of the people.
So when he said he came with the heads of the people, he came with along with the other tribes, such as the Puerto Rican Indians known as the Boricua, Taino, and so forth. They didn't come alone. They came along with the rest of the tribes of Israel. Read on.
He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel.
So he also executed justice and judgment too. That was part of Gad's duty when they came over here. Because Gad had laws, like we just read in the book of James Adair. They kept the laws and the ceremonies, also wearing the fringes. You notice amongst the Native American Indians, they wore the fringes in all their garments. I'm gonna show some pictures of that too when they wore the garments. That was a natural custom.
Right. Let's get that in the. I'm gonna.